y'all, I'm Cece, and today I'm here to talk to you about my most anticipated releases of 2025. So this is a big list. I have 33 books to talk about. It was supposed to be 30, but I like books, and I have no self-control, so y'all get a bonus. I have a pretty wide mix of genres, but the two biggest stacks, so to speak, would probably be queer romance and horror, but there is plenty of contemporary and sci-fi mixed in there as well. I am going to split this particular list up by genre, so if I am covering a genre that isn't your thing, you can go ahead and skip right to the next genre. Out of the 33 books I'm going to talk about, I believe 24 are queer releases. They are going to be throughout all the genres and throughout the video, and I'm going to make sure all the info about all of these releases is on the screen or down in the description below. Just if I forget to say an age group or a genre or that a book is queer, I'm gonna have something on the screen so that y'all still know. If you are new here, hi, I'm Cece. I talk about books on the internet and I am also an artist. You can find my work on Redbubble and InPrint and a whole bunch more if you check out the links in my description. Down there you will also find an affiliate link for bookshop.org. If you do end up wanting to pre-order any of these releases and you have the ability to support local independent bookstores in the US, Bookshop is a great place to do it. I don't want to waste any more time, so let's go ahead and get into this list of anticipated releases of 2025. We are going to start with queer romance. Let's get into it. First up, let's talk about I Think They Love You by Julian Winters. So starting off our stack of queer romances, this features fake dating and a second chance romance element, which I love, and also it very much gives me Succession vibes, and I will consume anything that even remotely reminds me of Succession. So in this book we follow Denzel. His father is this big shot CEO who has just very suddenly announced his retirement, which means the hot seat is up for grabs and Denzel wants it. In some previous instance of proving to his family that he is capable of commitment, thank you very much, he made up a fake relationship, which he now has to provide evidence for. Luckily, his best friend is on the sidelines, ready to support all the fake dating shenanigans, until they aren't. Basically, Denzel is still stuck with this fake dating thing, and now he has the worst alternative. He's fake dating the boy who broke his heart. I love Julian Winters forever and ever, and I'm just always going to fall for a good romance. So, moving on, I want to talk about It's a Love Skate Relationship. This is by Carli J. Carson. Basically, if you've seen the movie The Cutting Edge, this appears to be that, but sapphic. Incredible to me. If there's one thing I'm planning to look out for, it's the inevitable copious references to toe picks. Toe pick. So, in this YA book, we follow a hockey player named Charlie who has just been suspended from a very important season of hockey due to a fight. This was a really important semester. There were going to be scouts, so Charlie has to figure out some way to move forward. And in her attempt to save her future in hockey, she accepts just the worst proposal ever. She is going to become an emergency figure skating partner to Alexa. So Alexa's regular skating partner got injured in that same fight that got Charlie suspended, and now Alexa is also in a very, very serious situation when it comes to sports and her future. So Charlie and Alexa can't stand each other. This fight did not help, but they are also the only way either of them is going to be able to get the future that they wanted. I'm only covering a couple of queer sports romances in this video, but I'd just like to say that after years of begging for more queer sports books, it is so incredible to see a year just absolutely filled with them. Last year was too, but it warms my heart. Also, in terms of YA and rivalries and sports romances, I have Out of Step Into You by Ciera Burch. I just love a rivalry, and this follows ex-best friends Taylor and Mariana, who end up rivals in the same cross-country team 3 years after Mariana moved away and Taylor promptly ghosted her. I just recently read Make My Wish Come True by Allison Derrick and Rachel Lippincott, and it was an ex-best friends to lovers romance, and I really, really liked it. I was after more, so that's how we wound up here. I think I really love the drama of trying to repair a relationship that was so close but got broken so terribly. I don't know why that calls to me so much. It's a theme I should perhaps look at in my reading. Last queer romance sports book, I swear. I want to talk about Futbolista by Jonny Garza Villa. This is a new adult romance. I've seen some people listing it as young adult or as adult. The author clarified, they've said it is new adult. So you know. This book follows Gabriel, a definitely straight goalie, when he is paired with a philosophy tutor who just happens to be a guy he kissed once at a party. You know, as a favor. Their tutoring relationship builds to something more, which is great, but Gabby is also dealing with the fact that he doesn't know how he, a brown Mexican futbolista, who has already had to work so hard to get where he is, to get close to his future, and he's terrified that being bisexual is just going to be the final straw that keeps him from his family and from his dreams. This has been comped a lot to Red, White, and Royal Blue, which makes sense to me, but just the idea of the increased amount of pressure there is to be a certain way in public areas like sports. Expectations of masculinity, of sexuality are so specific in those spaces, and it can make it even more difficult to come to terms with your own identity, and I am really, really interested in seeing a romance that is also dealing with that aspect of Gabby's identity. Okay, I do still have 2 more romance books to talk about, but they get a little away from romance. We get a little mystery or thriller elements in these ones. The first of those that I want to talk about is The Great Orchid Heist by Eleanor Vendrell. This is a book that follows Phil. Phil intends to steal an extremely rare, splendid paradise orchid. The problem is, she stakes out the place, gets to know the layout, she starts to fall for the incredibly grumpy but also charming gardener's assistant. I absolutely live on heists. I survive on them, I thrive on them, so this sounds phenomenal, and the fact that there are so many different things this year that I get to be like, hey, this is basically my favorite thing, but about lesbians. It makes me so happy. Also, the tagline of this is great. First rule of the heist, don't fall in love. But they're gonna. Oh. And the last romance book that I want to talk about is If I Told You I'd Have to Kiss You. This is by May Marvel, and it is about 2 women, Yardley and Casey. They're dating, they love each other, it's great. The thing is, their relationship is crumbling under the weight of secrets that both of them are keeping. Or, I guess, secret, because the thing is, both of them are keeping the same secret, which is that they are both agents who work for the same agency, and they've been doing spy stuff all this time. But when an undercover shakedown goes wrong, it finally reveals both of their identities before either woman has the chance to come clean, and things are put on an entirely new playing field, because now they have to work together, but also they're learning about each other again for the first time, but it's the truth this time. Mr. and Mrs. Smith has just always been one of my favorites, so once again, the idea of going, hey, favorite thing here, but with ladies. Okay, we're moving past romance now. I have just a couple of contemporary or literary fiction books to talk about. The first is a YA contemporary. It is called One of the Boys by Victoria Zeller. That's the name. So I said I was done talking about sports romances. This technically isn't a romance, so I think I get a pass. This is just a YA contemporary, you guys. This book follows Grace, who is kind of struggling to find her place in her school again after starting to transition the summer before her senior year. There are a lot of things she left behind, like football that she was really passionate about. Seems like she has still a pretty good group of friends around her. The thing is, football is faltering without her, and her friends want her to come back and join the team still. And at that point, Grace has to reckon with herself, how she sees herself, and how she can be true to herself without leaving behind something that she really, really loves. There are so many YA books this year that have these like gorgeous illustrated covers with just like expressive art, and it makes me happy. I think they're gorgeous. The next book that I want to talk about is That's What She Said by Eleanor Pilcher. This is contemporary fiction about 2 best friends, Beth and Serena, who could not possibly be more different, but despite that, they are just like platonic soulmates. Beth is demisexual, and she has a history of confidence issues that have made it harder to advance in her job and made her less happy in relationships. Meanwhile, Serena is a free-spirited bisexual who oozes confidence. When Beth decides that she wants to take charge of her sex life, and by extension, hopefully the rest of her life, it makes sense that Serena is right there to support her in finishing everything on Beth's sexual odyssey list. Into the middle of this little carefree plan, though, crashes someone from Beth's old job who she had a serious crush on, and one of Serena's favorite hookups is pushing for more than a friends with benefits relationship, and what seemed kind of lighthearted, a chance to figure out new things about themselves, about love, and about sex, it all gets a lot more complicated, and even their friendship starts to get put into question. I love a good coming of age in your 20s book, just the messiness of figuring out what the hell is going on, despite the fact that I'm gonna be 30 this year. But I read this to my best friend, and he was like, oh, so that's perfect for you. And that's basically how everyone in my life has reacted when I've told them about this book, so I'm pretty excited to read it. I think it's gonna be a good time. And the last, literary fiction or contemporary fiction one I'm gonna talk about, it does have a speculative element, but it is still fiction. It's adult absurdist fiction. I'm talking about Blob, a love story by Maggie Sue. So this is about a woman who finds a creature, a blob, basically, with eyes, behind a bar, and she takes it home and starts trying to turn it into the ideal partner. So yeah, this is a love story about a sentient blob. I think it's gonna be pretty great. I will say that I love this cover so much more than the US cover. I refuse. The US cover, I get it, but this is so pretty with the pink. This is supposed to be a book about self-discovery and learning that you cannot control the ones you love. I think it sounds wild. I understand why it's on a lot of anticipated lists. I am beyond curious to check it out. Alright, let's keep going. We're gonna move into talking about some sci-fi, starting with Somebody Like Me. This is by Lucy Lapinska, and it popped out to me because it sounds like it's kind of further exploring some of the same ideas explored in one of my personal favorite episodes of Black Mirror, an episode called Be Right Back. So in this book, we're following Abigail, who is taking care of her older, ailing husband as the world ends. Or at least she will be taking care of him for the next few days. Because the thing is, Abigail isn't human. She's a replacement, or she was built as a replacement for the real Abigail, who died 16 years earlier. However, now with a new law changing things regarding AI and robotics, Abigail will be free for the first time to choose who she wants to be. But now she's left with, what is it to want? And if she isn't Abigail, then who is she? I love really emotional, contemplative sci-fi, and this sounds really gorgeous. Like I said, it reminds me of that Black Mirror episode. I'm going to guess it would not shock you to know that there are a lot of books coming out soon about AI, robotics, the ethics of creating AI, which is a topic I've always been interested in. It's just, it's getting more and more relevant as the days pass. So. Next up, I want to talk about Dissolution. This is a book by Nicholas Binge. It is described as an ambitious techno-thriller. It follows a woman who basically breaks into her husband's mind to probe his memories and find the answer to a problem that will not only save him, it might save reality itself. So Maggie's husband has been slowly losing memories of their life together, and Maggie's been having a hard time facing it, but she has been, and then a stranger turns up and reveals to her that Stanley is not losing his memories due to dementia or any kind of illness. Someone is stealing Stanley's memories. In his earlier years, Stanley was a huge tech genius. He created a bunch of incredible inventions, and one of those is a thing that allows Maggie to go into her husband's brain and start trying to find answers to all of the questions that she has. I'm sure this is going to be an emotional book, but also it kind of sounds like a brain heist, and I mean, I'm not gonna say no to a brain heist. Next up, I want to talk about a book called Hamang Luck by Yamamoto. Now, this book has been pitched as Ocean's 8 meets Blade Runner. I assume if you're still with me, you understand the kind of vibe that I'm laying out in books that I enjoy. I love a heist. I really love a heist. So this follows Edie, who got sold out by their last partner, and they have spent the last 8 years behind bars on an icy prison planet because of it. They are done with crime, except then an early parole opportunity appears, and it turns out that the offer for parole is extended by Angel, the person who sold out Edie last time. Now Angel's here to offer one last job and one last chance to bring down the billionaire tech god that they failed to take down last time. This is a cyberpunk heist book full of Hawaiian inspiration with an agender butch lesbian lead. So, it has all the makings of probably a favorite. That's what I'm thinking. Keeping it going with sci-fi, I want to talk about Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. This is a queer sci-fi novella for fans of cozy mysteries. I am one. So this is set aboard the HMS Fairweather, which is an interstellar passenger liner. Basically, you can upload your consciousness to the ship's library, and whenever you die, you awaken in a freshly grown body. So I guess they functionally invented immortality here in this future. Dorothy, one of the ship's detectives, awakens one day in a body that is not her own at the same time that somewhere else a dead body is found. Even more sinister than the murdered body, Dorothy discovers that someone has been deleting minds from the library itself, which is, I mean, killing the body isn't that bad. Deleting something from the library? That's murder in this world. There are a variety of suspects and people in Dorothy's life. There is specifically a suspect who owns a yarn store, and this yarn store proprietor is the ex-girlfriend of the body that Dorothy is currently inhabiting. And yet Dorothy and this woman immediately have some, like, flirty tension. Look, as much as I love serious, heavy books, and we're gonna talk about some intense ones, we're getting into horror at the end pretty soon. I love a cozy read, and this sounds fantastic. The fact that it is the intro to a series, I think, is really exciting. I feel like I'm telling you all about all of the media that made me when I was a kid. But to bring it back to that, my passion for reading, a lot of it was because of Nancy Drew and reading little mystery books. Actually, since we're talking about books that sound amazing because of the media that made me, and we're talking about books set on spaceships, I know exactly which thing we should get to next. It's almost like I planned this. So, Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove sounds queer and pulpy and insane in the best possible ways. Another little secret into my background, I grew up watching classic black and white monster movies, and now I read mostly queer sci-fi, so this book that combines both is kind of perfect. Actually, I would love to just read to you the tagline that got me. My jaw dropped. It was perfect. Spaceships aren't programmed to seek revenge, but for Dracula, Demeter will make an exception. Like, so good. I was left speechless. Give me more, immediately. So, the Demeter is a starship that shuttles humans between Earth and Alpha Centauri. They have a pretty good track record, and then Dracula gets on board, and all of a sudden, Demeter's passengers are showing up dead. So, she is forced to team up with a motley crew of monsters and machines, including, but not limited to, a werewolf, a pharaoh, and a fleet of spider drones to face Dracula and hopefully save the ship. I think this sounds like a ridiculous amount of fun. I love getting into the, like, classic monsters and also turning it into a mystery on a spaceship. It's too good. It's too good. Alright, let's keep it moving. I want to talk about Cosmic Love at the Multiverse Hair Salon by Annie Mayer. This is a sci-fi romance that also includes a twisty mystery element. So in this book, a misdirected text manages to connect Tressa and Meryl. The two hit it off and seem to have a great relationship. They plan to meet, and Meryl never shows. Tressa's ready to just kind of write it off as something that sadly never was, until Meryl's sister shows up demanding more information. Because there's no way that Tressa could have been talking to Meryl, because Meryl has been missing for a month.
And she says, Betsy's been dead for 10 years.
Further investigation reveals, and I have to say I don't know how I would take this if this is what my further investigations revealed. This whole thing is actually the result of a temporal paradox, and Meryl and Tressa's universes are just kind of sliding up right next to each other. Basically, Tressa and Meryl come from super similar worlds where they are 5 months apart in time. So now it is a race down to the deadline of when Meryl disappears in her universe. Tressa's friends and Meryl's friends are all on the case trying to solve this big crazy mystery. I'm very excited about this book. But I wanted to pitch it and then use it as my perfect little intro for us to move into talking about fantasy, because I have another book I want to talk about and you're gonna hear some similar themes. So what? I like sapphics in alternate universes. Sue me. So next I want to talk about Coffee Shop in an Alternate Universe by C.B. Lee. I met C.B. way back in 2017, and at the very, very first meeting, like the first time we met for coffee, not even the first time we met and filmed an interview in my little New York City hotel room, but at that first meeting, they pitched to me their idea for this book. So I don't actually have the emotions to express how cool it is to now see it, and it's a whole book, and it's got a cover, and it's gonna be released. I remember they were so inspired by the idea of coffee shop AUs, and they wanted to get into the idea of what if the coffee shop itself was the, like, AU hinge of the universe. Basically, this is a queer multiversal rom-com about an overachieving scientist and a prophesied chosen one who happen to meet at a coffee shop that bridges their two extremely different realities. Kat and Brenda are immediately charmed by one another, but if you can believe it, making relationships work across dimensions, realities, whatever, is a little complicated, especially because Kat is also, in her world, a prophesied chosen one, and she's kind of just trying to push that to the back of her mind right now. I will forever have all the love in the world for sapphics crossing time and space to be together, and it's so cool to see this book be a book and not just an idea that I'm hearing in a coffee shop. So, hello, I'm back. My camera died. Let's keep this going. So the next book that I want to talk about is Gifted and Talented by Olivia Blake. This might be setting my expectations too high, but I feel in my soul that this could be the thing that fills the void that's been left in me since Succession ended. So this is adult fantasy, and basically the setup of this is that Thayer Wren, who is this huge CEO of a company called Renfair Magitech, is dead. And that means that any one of his 3 telepathically and electrokinetically gifted children could be the one to claim the throne. Once again, I would absolutely just love to read a line to you from the summary. On the pipeline of gifted kid to clinically depressed adult, nobody wins. But which Wren will come out on top? The combination of, like, trauma and mental illness combined with that level of power and there's magic has me rubbing my hands together like a fly. Okay, from here on out, be prepared to hear the words monstrous and sapphic romance even more often than you already have. We do have a couple more fantasy books and then on to horror, but I'll say that there's perhaps a theme. Alright, so the next book that I want to talk about is Aunt Tigress. This is by Emily Yu-Jean Chin. This is an adult urban fantasy book that is inspired by Chinese and First Nation mythology. And once again, I just have a line to read you from the description. The description on Goodreads includes the line, Tam hasn't eaten anyone in years. I think that's a great way to hook me. So this is about Tam, who is keeping her not-so-human side kind of on the DL as she tries to live a fairly normal life in Calgary. That is, until her estranged aunt is murdered and skinned, and Tam inherits Aunt Tigress's menagerie of familiars, but also her mysterious, tentacled enemies. So Tam sets out on a journey with her girlfriend to hopefully solve the case of her aunt's murder, get the monsters off her back, and reckon with being something that she considers monstrous. This is supposed to have a monstrous murder plot, but a super sweet sapphic romance at its center, which sounds perfect for me, but, you know, that's just me. Alright, the last fantasy book that I want to talk about is another novella, and that is Brighter Than Scale, Swifter Than Flame by Neon Yang. This is a queer, Asian-inspired fantasy novella about a renowned dragon slayer who is sent to woo the queen of a foreign nation, a nation that worships dragons rather than kills them. So this is about two women from very, very different worlds who definitely don't trust each other at all at first. They both represent nations of people. So when they build a relationship, it could really start to evolve into something more. Something else from the summary of this is that it features a dragon slayer who never takes off her armor, which gives me just the early indication that perhaps at some point someone might delicately finally remove that armor. Could happen. I'm kind of hoping it happens. Next, I want to move on to a book that I'm officially, we're tagging it as a thriller, but it is genreless in the best way. The book that I'm talking about is The Corruption of Hollis Brown. This is by Kay Ancrum, and I need it. So like I said, this kind of defies genre. There are parts of it that are a romantic thriller, but there are other parts that lean more into dark fantasy or horror. So, after unknowingly making a crossroads deal, Hollis finds himself losing control of his body. As a spirit named Walt, a boy with a dark past and unfinished business, starts to take control instead. Which seems bad, but slowly as they share a body, Hollis and Walt start to form a bond, and before too long they find the prospect of Walt's overdue exorcism and the realities of living as just one person in one body again a terrifying reality rather than a hopeful inevitable. Unhinged, codependent relationship vibes could not be more my thing, and Kayla's writing is so beautiful, I don't even have the words for it. I think this book could possibly ruin me. Jury's still out on that. We'll check back. So for the last bit of this video, I am going to be talking about horror releases. I have still kind of split these horror books into two mini categories, so we're going to talk about some horror that's set more contemporarily, and then we're going to talk about some historical horror to wrap up. So first I want to talk about a book called Direct Descendant by Tanya Huff. This sounds very, very fun because it is both a horror mystery and a cozy romance. So this book is about a town called Lake Argin, whose founders made a deal with the Dark Force, and that has allowed the town to thrive up to this point. All it requires is a few sacrifices, no big deal. Everything's pretty much fine until someone a little too important goes missing, and that is when a PI is sent to investigate the town to try to figure out where this very important missing person went. The easy rhythm of the town is kind of thrown off by her appearance. We are following a character named Cassidy, who is a part-time baker and part-time servant of the Dark Force that the town worships. She's just trying to keep things calm. But the thing is, her and the PI clearly have chemistry right away, so that's gonna add some issues. This book is giving me such intense Welcome to Night Vale vibes. Like, the idea of there being some eldritch town somewhere full of weird, mysterious stuff, and so you send a normal to go solve it, and when the normal shows up, they're like, hey, what the hell is happening in this city? And everyone else in the town is like, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that question over how beautiful you are. Would you stay forever? There's a reason it worked for me in Welcome to Night Vale. It's a very charming prospect, and I think this book sounds charming, while it also sounds a little creepy. Moving on, we're going to talk about Voice Like a Hyacinth. This is by Mallory Pearson. It is adult horror, and it is about 5 queer friends who are artists, and they're all completely obsessed with each other. Like, they are one another's muses. They live and die creating for each other. This group turns to the occult to curse a professor, and they wind up facing, the summary says, unspeakable consequences, which seems pretty bad. I would like to say I'm obsessed with this cover. Like, it is so gorgeous. The color is wonderful, but it's so eerie. It took me so long to notice the pig in the, like, right on the cover. I think I've established that deeply obsessive relationships are one of my favorite fiction things, so pairing that with some occult stuff is also very much my jam. And honestly, as much as I love books where we get to summon things and punish people who deserve it, it's kind of nice to read a book where you summon something and things go exactly as bad as one expects, if you're going to summon something. Okay, moving on, I want to talk about The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This is described in the summary and in reviews over and over again as a modern-day folk horror, so I believe this is modern horror. But to be fair, it's also kind of vague because this is a gothic fantasy about a mother and daughter who live in a small cabin in the woods. So this book is about Margot, whose entire world is her mother and this little cottage that they have together, and that is only occasionally interrupted by a stranger that strays too far from the path and winds up, I want to say, in Margot's mother's clutches, because while she definitely seems to treat her guests well, I do believe she's eating them at the end of it, until a stray wanders in and she seems too precious and too beautiful to let go. So for the first time, Margot has to confront the shifting dynamics in her own relationship, what freedom means to her, and she has to finally address her relationship with her mother that has been her entire life. It is ultimately centered on this deeply complex, horrific bond between mother and daughter, which I think sounds great, and early reviews for this book have hyped it beyond words, actually. So, again, I'm perhaps overhyped for this one, but I think it's gonna be amazing. Let's keep trucking. Next, I want to talk about The Summer I Ate the Rich. This is by Micah Mulit and Maritza Mulit. It is a YA horror book inspired by Haitian zombie lore, which sounds amazing already. And keeping that all in mind, it is also a book about wealth and class disparity and racial inequality, and how all of that is pretty much built in to our society now. So this is a book about a girl who uses her previously hidden zombie abilities to finally exact revenge on the wealthy elites who have hurt her family in the past. I really like zombie movies, but I haven't had as much luck with zombie books, and I just think this one sounds really fantastic, eerie, creepy, and interesting. So I'm very happy to consider this a zombie book that I am anticipating. Next up, we have a book called Listen to Your Sister by Nina Veal, and this is a book that is on my list kind of because people won't tell me what it's about. So this follows a character named Kala who has had repeated nightmares of her younger brothers dying and her having no way to stop it. And then she is suddenly left with the impossible task of being the guardian to both of her younger brothers. After a series of bizarre, almost accidents and almost incidents and a protest that goes a little too far, Kala and her brothers end up running, and they find refuge in a cabin in the woods that seems to have a lot more hidden behind its walls than Kala and her brothers think. So I was already interested in the prospect of the scary cabin stuff. I like a good cabin in the woods story, but the thing I've been seeing over and over with reviews is that this book goes places that are very unexpected, that are surprising, and that are incredibly well done. And people seem incredibly tight-lipped about the nature of what goes on in the cabin. So I want to know. I'm interested. Another YA horror book that I am very much anticipating is called They Bloom at Night. This is by Trong Thang Tran, and it is YA horror that is infused with Vietnamese folklore and some eco-horror elements. In this book, the small town of Mercy, Louisiana was left completely changed after a storm left it covered in a red algae that seems to mutate everything that it comes in contact with, and that includes our main character. So Noon is facing changes within her body as the algae has its effects, and then she is forced to work with the daughter of her enemy to try to hunt some of the mutated wildlife that now fills the waters of Mercy. This cover is insane. It's gorgeous. I love it. And besides all of that, and the body horror and the eeriness, this is also supposed to get into explorations of gender and sexuality and identity, and it sounds phenomenal. You're not gonna believe it, I have another novella to talk about. This one is called But Not Too Bold by Hashe Pueyo. This is a novella that was originally released in 2022 in Portuguese, so this is just being released as the English translation, and I do think this is very cool. The author of this book is a writer as well as a translator, so she actually translated her own work with this one. Here's the thing, I both want to read this book and I deeply fear it in my core. Because I have a genuine phobia of spiders. And this is about a woman who is a servant for a giant humanoid spider who has a particular hunger for brides. I do love this cover. I do want to show you all the original cover just to compare something. I don't know if this is better or worse to look at spider-wise, is what I can't decide. Because at least with the new one, you know where the spider is. Very front and center. But with the original cover, I just keep finding new spiders, and I don't like that. Point is, this is supposed to be dark gothic fantasy, and there is of course a sapphic monster romance. In fact, since we're already talking about sapphic monster romance, I think this is a great opportunity to segue right on into Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin, because this appears to be a sapphic reimagining of Little Shop of Horrors set in like a failing mall. It's too good! So this is about a romance that kind of springs up between two characters, Shell and Nev. Nev, who needed help at her florist shop. But as the two of them start to flirt, what Shell doesn't know is that a carnivorous orchid named Baby watches them from the shadows. He wants Nev, and he'll stop at nothing to get her. You're never gonna believe this. I have another poll quote that I'd love to share. For God's sake. Please just settle. Oh my goodness! You can't wait another minute? Not even one more? And now we try to do the last of this with a cat on my lap. So, poll quote. I have another one. I just want to read it to you. This is a story about possession and monstrosity and working retail. It is about hunger and desire and other terrible things that grow. It's calling to me like a siren song. Okay, I do have one sci-fi horror that I want to cover before we get into our last 4 historical horror books. That sci-fi horror is Cold Eternity by S.A. Barnes. So S.A. Barnes is an author who has already written a couple of really well-loved sci-fi horror books. This is just the newest one, and I want to read every single one of them. This particular book follows a woman who is on the run from a political scandal, so she accepts kind of a terrible job. She works aboard a ship that is transporting cryogenically frozen important people, and her only role is to wake up every 3 hours, check everything in the ship, and then go back to sleep again. Slowly over time, though, she starts to feel that she is seeing things creeping in the corners of her vision, and she just can't decide if it's because of sleep deprivation or because something genuinely awful is happening on board. Alright, we have made it to the end of this very long list. Let's talk about the 4 historical horror novels. Start by talking about Carrion Crow. This is by Heather Parry. This is gothic horror that takes a lot of inspiration from the short story The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Don't think it's anywhere that I can grab. The Yellow Wallpaper was one of my personal favorite short stories that I read in English class, and it just kind of made a deep impact on my brain. Like, it crawled into my body and it lives there forever. In Carrion Crow, we are following a woman named Marguerite who has been confined to an attic, ostensibly because her mother is very concerned about her decision to become engaged to a penniless solicitor, and she wants to educate her daughter about what is right and proper. However, there are deeper secrets to this, and one of the more central things is that Marguerite's narration can't be trusted. The Yellow Wallpaper is already such a fascinating story about women and mental illness and confinement and freedom, and I'm so interested to see those ideas explored in more of a long-form story, but still, you know, the idea of a woman in an attic with just, like, only a couple of things to look at going completely mad. Next up, we have a book that I think a lot of people are anticipating, and that is The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a story within a story. We're meant to be reading the diary of a Lutheran pastor, and this diary has just been found. It's been hidden in a wall all this time, but the diary itself is dated to 1912, and the diary transcribes a series of interviews with a Blackfeet named Goodstab, who is telling the long, bloody story of his life. The story he tells unveils a slow massacre, a chain of events going back to 217 dead Blackfeet in the snow. Here's the thing, I'm always excited for new Stephen Graham Jones. I've been reading him for years. I'm going to continue to read his books. The most recent book that I read from him was also one of his most recent releases. I Was a Teenage Slasher, and that one played with form and style so well. It was so brilliant and inventive, and I know that he is going to absolutely blow me away with this one. Second to last, we have Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. This is a feminist reworking of Carmilla, which is a novella by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. I actually have it, and I can even reach it with the cat on my lap. Carmilla was a pretty foundational piece of writing that helped inspire Bram Stoker's Dracula. I love it. This is great. Hungerstone follows Lenore, who is moving with her husband to a manor in the countryside, like out of the hustle and bustle of London. The relationship between the two of them has deteriorated for several reasons that will probably become apparent as the book goes on. Them setting up their new life is interrupted fairly quickly by a carriage accident, which brings a new visitor to stay with Lenore and her husband, the mysterious Carmilla. Carmilla is weak during the day, and she thrives at night. She awakens something in Lenore, and coincidentally, a bunch of girls in nearby villages are also starting to get sick. I think this one is for the gays who watched the Carmilla web series back in the day. Like, we did it, guys. We're getting dramatic Carmilla retellings now. Times they are a-changin'. It's a beautiful new world. Well, okay, the last book that I want to cover today is called The Starving Saints. This is by Caitlyn Starling, and it is medieval horror, which is so great. Medieval horror set in a castle under siege at that. So this siege has been going on for months. Everyone is really starting to feel the effects. People have been pushed nearly to their breaking point, and then all of a sudden, a miracle. The figures of the Constant Lady and her saints appear, and they come bearing food and relief. So throughout this book, we're following 3 different women in the castle. I believe we have a knight, a nun turned sorceress, and then way down below everything, a servant girl who has her mind set on revenge. As you can imagine, in medieval times, the appearance of saints pretty much sways everybody onto their side immediately. And before too long, the crowd and the castle descend into a bacchanalian madness that is so wild and consuming that they don't even seem to remember they are under siege. One day I'll get through a video without talking about the Luminous Dead, but whatever. Caitlyn Starling wrote one of my very favorite books, The Luminous Dead. This is a sci-fi horror. It's claustrophobic, it's creepy, it's got an unreliable narrator. I love it. This one has lady knights and sapphics. That sounds beyond brilliant. I have not shut up about this book since I learned about it. I probably won't shut up about it until I read it. Okay, so those are all of the books. Well, not all of them. Those are all of the books that I decided I could conceivably cover in this video. Remember to check out the description for links and details about all of these books. Plus, hey, while you're at it looking at links, maybe you could check out some of my art. It's cool. It's bookish. I would love to hear what some of your anticipated releases are. It seems like just an amazing year for releases, and I want to know what everyone is anticipating, not just me. But also, did you add any of these books to your TBR? Like, did I convince you? Are you now also anticipating these? I'm curious which books stood out to people more than others. But with all of that covered, I am going to go ahead and say thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then consider giving it a like, maybe hitting subscribe so you know next time I upload, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!